Hi, everyone. So I'm going to be talking about security documentation and give an overview into leatherworking. So brief agenda of what we're talking about. Who am I? Knowing the target audience of this talk, why documentation? What made me think that, yeah, I think everybody would love to hear about documentation. I know I think party when I hear documentation. How to tell the story when you're doing some type of, reporting, knowing the requirements, like knowing who your audience is, if when you're using pictures, how to frame them so that it's telling a tale that's not too verbose, and just making a checkpoint to review your work. So the obligatory who am I slide. I've been with the Western Regional CCDC for 10 years. I will go into that in a little bit. It's a cybersecurity competition where college students get attacked by professional red teamers. I was on the blue team, and then I've been the lead of the scoring team since 2016. In my security profession, I've been doing endpoint engineering, vulnerability management, and I'm currently a senior cyber intelligence analyst. And been a hacker way longer than that, but I've been being a goon for DEF CON for the last 5 years. So overall, the target audience of this is for SOC analysts and for like threat intelligence. That's what I do in my day-to-day role, and just trying to make sure that that's the intended audience, and just know that this can apply for anyone, but the main focus for myself is the SOC analysts and threat intelligence. So why documentation, right? Documentation is pretty important. Nobody really enjoys doing it. And, in my own experience with, and I apologize to the folks who are doing the captioning for this. I mentioned earlier, it's the CCDC, it's the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. I'm out of the Western region, and one of those goals is that the students get tasks from the scoring team, and their job is to accomplish these tasks. They can be business tasks such as replying to the CEO's email, to also doing technical tasks. And oftentimes, the very first thing that we give them is CIS control number 1, which is an asset inventory. And there's plenty of times where we get good documentation back where they account for all the assets and things. But then there's other times where we'll receive back documentation where we ask for an asset inventory, and then they just give us walls and walls of text of an Nmap report. There's no filtering, so it's the raw output. It spans 50 pages, etc. So, there's too much documentation, and it's not necessarily relevant. In a real world example, I was on a vulnerability management team, and a major, security vendor's report came back with 100,000 plus pages. I think honestly, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000 or 300,000 pages in a PDF file. I turned to my CISO and I said, "Hey, is it cool like if I give you 100,000 page vuln report?" And he's like, "Dude, I would get fired if you sent me that thing." So it's just so much overkill, where there's bad documentation coming from even from the vendors that we have to clean up before we can send it off to to the relevant parties. Another reason why documentation is so important is that there's real world consequences. So, if you're documenting an incident and you see that some malware executed, or even, you see a user doing some malicious things, and, you have to write it up, those findings can go to HR, they can go to legal, they can go to the authorities, depending on how bad the incident is. So, there's definitely some real world connotations where what we provide will be used in a context that's not our intended audience. So it needs to be clear and it needs to be concise. When you're telling the story, you have to realize that security is basically just knowing what's normal and being able to explain why it's deviant. Um, the the way a program will load is, you click the icon, it loads into memory, it opens a file, and then it writes, you save the file to disk. But if you open the program and then now it starts calling out to the internet and it's not designed to call out to the internet, like, you have to be able to explain that clearly and concisely, that what we're seeing here is not normal and here is why. The main part of telling the story is that you're doing basically investigative work. And if you've taken like journalism 101, you'll hear of the 5 W's: the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. And by answering those 5 questions, oftentimes you basically tell the story of how as well. Sometimes you'll hear the 5 W's and the H, but when you're telling that story, you have to explain, this user was observed accessing this file share, and this file share, was operating in a non-standard way. So as you go through, you have to answer those questions. Will you have all the answers to those questions? Not necessarily, but it definitely helps to gather as much information as you can. And when you're doing this reporting, you should be using like a neutral language, right? You're going off of what you've observed and not so much what you're not accusing. You're going off of the facts, and the facts say that you saw this user account access this directory at this time. You're not saying, oh, this user is totally trying to compromise the entire company, and I can prove it. No, it's like, you're this is a computer that is associated with this user ID, and trying to keep the language neutral also helps to tell the story accurately. You want to avoid accusing accusations. You want to avoid embellishment. You don't want to say, oh, I found 10,000 files in this directory and there's literally just 100. And you don't want to speculate either. Well, it's obvious that he was doing this. Like, no, there's real no obvious answer. You want to go off of and stick with basically the facts that you are observing. So when you're writing, it's this technical writing where you're going to need to put in details, IP addresses, file hashes, crazy commands that you're seeing, observing. And so with that, you have to know that your audience may not be in that same boat with you. They may not have that same level of understanding. So you have to take a few extra steps to explain and say, this is bad because when this was observed, these things happened, and here's another, just like this is because of X, Y, or Z happening. You want to make it a point to include the technical details, but you might also have to rephrase it and restate it so that it's clear. The one key thing is, know your audience rather. So are you addressing, fellow analysts or engineers, or are you addressing your C-suite? Where I'm currently at, the CISO has worked through the entire rank, so they want the technical detail when we tell them, a file hash was observed and seeing malware executing on this specific port on this specific protocol. But Other folks may not, and they may not understand at all what you're talking about. So you really have to try to understand who's asking the question, what type of information are you trying to convey to the right audience. So one thing about screenshots is that they're great. They tell so much, the whole adage of if a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? But when you're including a screenshot, are you able to tell the picture, understand what the picture's trying to say? So I grabbed this example because I knew it was cluttered, right? But if you take a moment, can you find Steam? Can you find the logo for Handbrake in there, right? So let me go ahead and try to clarify that and show you, right? So with this, they're still there. I've obfuscated the rest of the background so that I've blurred out everything that's not Steam and Handbrake, but it's still a bit of a challenge. So now here, it was right there. So when you're working with screenshots and you're trying to include that as part of your documentation, you want to make sure to like crop down and emphasize specific things, right? The relevant detail. You see a command running and you see these files on the disk, then if there's a screenshot where it's just this massive wall of text, do you really need every single thing on that screenshot? Can you crop out sections and only highlight what's really telling the story, what's really relevant to the story? So this is an example of the IPFS protocol. And so I just took this screenshot and tried to emphasize, like, I highlighted that the documents docs.ipfs.io site does show that there's a browser companion available. And just, with this screenshot, it's being able to convey, like, you can just click here and click here, and now you can find whatever it is you need on this, or, with this specific page. So just being able to crop things down a little bit and just highlight and emphasize. You can definitely go too crazy with with adding annotations to screenshots as well. So just be mindful of only highlight the relevant details. So the other thing with this is to make sure that you are reviewing your work, right? Get a second opinion, have a peer take a look at it and say, I wrote up this report. Can you just take a few minutes and read this over for me? That says a lot, because there have been plenty of times where I wrote something, I thought it was beautiful, and I was getting ready to hit send, and then I was like, hey, let me ask my coworker. They looked it over, and now it was, ooh, this sentence just doesn't make any sense. What do you mean by this? And then I'd revise the sentence and send it over, and then I finally look like that cute puppy there and say, well, okay, says it looks good. All right, I'm happy. So definitely get a second opinion before you send out any documentation that you need to. And the other thing is, definitely use spell check and grammar checking. And, there's a huge asterisk there, because when you're writing with technical documentation, it's, we have so many acronyms and jargon that you could write an entire paragraph that makes sense to you, but the spell checker will just freak out on you and say every word is wrong. So from there, you can either, you know, suffer through it and click next on, DHCP, next. Or you can add those phrases to the spell checker so that they're recognized for the next time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch it up and take it over to the other camera. And it's just 1 second here. Great. Turn on my other light here so we can see some things. All right, switching gears altogether. So who am I? I'm still Tim. what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about leatherworking and how I got into it, just some of the qualities of leatherworking or leather, how you can recognize good leather, bad leather, some of the tools, techniques, and procedures that are used in leatherworking. And I'm not sorry for that pun. So for this, I was introduced to leatherworking through the Crucible. It's an industrial art school based out of Oakland, California. And I took 2 classes. One was like an introductory course, and that was in 2017. And then I took like their follow-on, level 2. And for that, this was something that I had made during the leatherworking 1 course, where it's a small bag. And, this was like one of the projects that came with it. And, this is always going to eat at me with these 2 extra holes here. But, they're hidden on the front. So, there's bags that I've made. There's coasters that I've made where this is the Los Angeles Kings hockey logo. I've got another coaster here where I've got a flower, and you see the contours in here, and that is some of the tools, which I'll show you how to make some of those contours. This one's a prototype of a shoe/slipper that I've made. It's like has lining on the top, where the lining, so you put your foot in, it's not just a solid raw piece of leather. So that's a sample that I made there. All right, so now talking about sizes and shapes of leather. You have to picture this is a cow, and oftentimes, cow, it also comes in goat and sheep, etc. But the most common is cow, and it's when they take the skin off of the animal, you have the different sizes. So you'd have a whole hide that you can purchase. You have a side where they just give you half of it. The portion from the top forward is for the double shoulder, and that's again from the hoof all the way around the animal to the other end of the hoof. Then you also have single shoulders, bends, double bends, which is more of like the stomach or the back area. You have the belly, and then you also have the single butt. I just wanted to say single butt. Okay. Next up. So now this is where we talk about the qualities of leather and how you can recognize different types. So when we're talking about chrome tan leather is already finished and it's pretty soft. And what the tanning process is the leather is rubbed with salt to dry it out so that any extra liquid and moisture in it is taken out, so that the leather doesn't like rot from all this excess moisture. So chrome tan is typically soft and flexible. This is a piece here, really thin. And it also comes in an array of colors. They tend to do the tanning and the color at the same time. So again, fairly flexible, fairly thin. Then when you're talking leatherworking, it's typically what we're talking about here is vegetable tan. So they take materials from tree bark and things like that, and those are used to dry the leather so that it will extract all of the moisture out. Now this piece is pretty nice. It is also when you hear vegetable tan, it's typically comes with this natural color, and this has the ability to be dyed. The other colors, when they're pre-dyed, you can't really dye them again. So now this one is also vegetable tan, but this one is dyed a dark brown. Okay, so when we're talking about the types and grain of leather, so we have the full grain and the top grain, which is basically the first couple of layers here. So Full grain is here, and you're looking at the cross section of the hide, and then once that's kind of stripped away, then you're left with the suede, and that's like the real soft, felty type of leather. And then you've seen phrases running around where you go to buy something, it's like, ooh, genuine leather. Um, the only thing that's genuine about it is that it is the scraps of leather. It's basically the hot dog of leather. They just take all the bad parts of leather, mush it together, and slap the genuine label on there, and try to sell it to you like it's a, like it's this premium piece, but it's really not. What you would want is you would want the full grain or the top grain. Those are the premier pieces of leather. So, and how do we get that? Is they feed the cowhide through a splitter. It splits it. Now you have the top cut, which is the full grain and the top grain, and then the bottom cut where the suede and genuine leather and other types of leather are processed out of the bottom piece of it there. So now this measurement has always confused me. So bear with me. Now, they always talk about the thickness being in ounces or millimeters. Now, there's a handy gauge that is sold, and you have this here where, see if I can get that there. So it has measurements where it basically says, 2 millimeters or 8 ounces and 3.2 millimeters, etc. So what this is once the leather is split to 1/64th of an inch, I believe, then they weigh it, and 1/64th of an inch for an entire hide is supposed to be an ounce, I guess, but it's really confusing. I genuinely don't know. Look, it's fine. So I'm just going to skip that, but in North America, they all refer to it as ounces. Everybody else does the same measurement of millimeters. All right. So now tools. There are so many tools when it comes to leatherwork. And when you're doing leatherworking, right, and you thought security was bad with the amount of tools. So this is just a little reference chart for all of the SKUs that are available for some of the tools that I'm going to show. And they want you to bring this back to the store every time you go in, and just put a little dot like, oh, I own this one, I own this one. It's very much like Pokemon. They want you to catch them all. So how do we get a pattern onto leather? I hope you like tracing, because you have to trace it, and you have to trace it again, and you have to trace it a third time. Now, the first time, right, it's just a printout on paper. Say hello to the Pancakes coaster. So what you do is you get a clear film, and you put that over, and then you draw and trace everything out. So now you have the tracing film. So now that you have the tracing film, you need to put this onto the leather. So now you take this and you put that over, and then you trace it yet again onto the leather. There's a special stylus that's used where it has just a dull point, but you would, when working with leather, because the moisture has been all removed, you have to basically wet the leather each time you go to make impressions on it. So then the next part, and we'll go into more detail here, is where you carve, and then there's the tooling, color, final assembly. But all of those processes, each one has its own unique set of tools. So let me get my handy spray bottle. And I just sprayed a bunch of electronics, so that's going to go well. So once we have this, we go ahead and get the swivel knife. Now what this knife does is it spins so that you can make complex shapes. Now this, this is the finger rest, and as you go through, drag it towards you, and that helps make curvy shapes on the leather itself. You're supposed to once you get the pattern in here, you would go through, and the whole point of this knife is to create emphasis on the actual design. So I had to go in and carve this out so that it's more prominent. All right, next up. Next up is you have the tooling. And so, there's a solid surface where you can see here, this surface is a fake countertop slab. Everybody says use granite or something, but I literally went to my local countertop shop and said, hey, do you have some scraps? The guy's like, sure. And he gave me this. And so what this is, this solid surface will basically allow you to make sure that the impressions are deep and noticeable. So let me show you how that actually works here. So wet the leather again. So now some of the tools that come up here, we have the camouflage tool. Don't ask me where they got these names from. I don't know. But this is the camouflage tool. And what this does is there's going to be a bit of a shaky cam here. So please look away if you're sensitive. I'll let you know when it's safe. Okay, so things should have cleared up by now. So what this does is it just leaves this nice impression. Let me show there we go. And this one's kind of like a seashell type shape. Then you also have the pear shader. The pear shader kind of allows you to do contours around things. So let me see if I could do this. And there's going to be some more shaky cam here, folks. So that's the pear shader. As you can see, that makes this nice little contour where it's just pressing in the leather just a little bit there. Next up is the beveler. And what this does is it kind of allows at a slant. It allows it to go in at a slant. And all of this is the whole purpose of all of these. Sorry, shaky cam. Purpose of all of these is to just add like 3D layering to the leather when you're doing some of that. So, this goes in and does like this nice solid, it leaves it so that it's in straight down on this side, but then it goes in at this nice smooth bevel on that side. So the next tool that we have is the veiner. And what this does, some more shaky cam. Very similar, where it just does this nice, grooved pattern. And then this can be used if you do it back and forth. What this can do is make various shapes, like borders and such. So here's the shaky cam one more time. So it's not good, fine. And you take a little bit more time. I'm feeling slightly rushed. You can line these up a little bit better to make like a nice smooth curve. So then the last tool that we have is the second to last. We have the cedar, and this does just basic dots. And if you're making a flower type pattern, the dot will basically can be kind of like the center of the flowers. So let me go ahead and do shaky cam again. If you go too hard, you can actually punch through the leather altogether. Hey, that rhymed. So, so now the next piece is backgrounder. And what this does is it creates a nice like uniform shape that just goes across on the on the leather, and you can follow it along. So there's going to be some more shaky cam. Not my best work. So here, as you can see, it does this nice. Let's see if I can make that a little bit better. So it adds like a nice impression on there while it's like depressing the leather down. So next up is cutting. And the most common way is a utility knife. Any utility knife will do. The main thing is to make sure that it is sharp. They always need to be sharp. Leather is very, very tough to cut through. And when you're doing cuts, you would do cuts that's light, and just keep making multiple passes through it until you actually cut all the way through. So this, I don't know who saw my tweet beforehand. This guy is the strap cutter. And what this does is you select the various measurements here. Right now it's currently set to 1 inch. And you would tighten this down. And what this does is this can make a solid, like, straight line. That's its sole purpose in life. So you would feed this through, and there's a small razor blade right here. And what that razor blade does is just slices right through. So you have to have a straight line all the way down here, because if you don't, then you're going to have a wobbly, a wobbly line. So once you get it started, it's a little tough to get started. You would pull this through, and now this is now making a split down the leather like this. So if I go all the way through this piece, all the way down, this is going to give me one solid, like, uniform cut of 1 inch all the way down. So that's the purpose of the strap cutter here. This thing, it's like $10 or $15, and it lasts a lifetime. So the next fun thing is a stitch groover. And this, you basically run it down the edge of the leather to make a groove that you can use as a guide mark when you're punching holes for stitching. So if we just run this down, this follows the nice clean edge that you just cut in, and it leaves these nice little curly cues, which are so satisfying. So that's the whole purpose of this. This is adjustable. It can go out a good 1.5 inches or so. And you would punch holes down here, marry the sides up, and sew it together. So then now we've got some skiving knives. Now these are scary, and what we have is, this one is a Japanese style. That's what they call the Japanese style skiving knife. And the whole point of this is to shave the leather down so that it can be go to a tapered point. And so I'm just going to do a real small section here. And I'm working with live tools, so please excuse me if I'm not speaking. I don't want to slice my fingers off. These guys are extremely sharp. As you can see, I just gouge it into the paper here. So if you'll notice, right, this, this just shave this nice little portion off right here. And so now it's coming to this tapered point. And knives need to be closed up, otherwise you get injuries. So this is another style of skiving tool, and it just has a razor blade here. And same thing, a similar principle. It's just this one's more awkward to work through. Oh no, the one time it wants to work right. So yeah, you would just kind of slowly shave the leather. And this one's a lot harder to control than the other one, so I prefer the Japanese style, personally. All right, so now that we have made a mess, that just goes everywhere.
Tim, I got to jump in with questions to close us
Sure,
out. I'm sorry.
no problem. I was just wrapping up because oh look, I'm out of time.
Have you ever done any work with myco leather, which is made from mushrooms?
I have not, no.
Is there any need to replace the blade on the strap cutter?
Yes, that goes bad every so often, or not bad, just dull. And yeah, there's you would just remove the screw here, the screws, and then slide out the razor there, and you could just buy a replacement for it.
And then CDC or CCDC, which you play a large part in. How have you seen them incorporate a lot of what you were talking about with the requirement for storytelling with reporting and documentation?
So from that standpoint, I would say that the some of the reports that we get are very technical focused, technical driven, and it's just like a big data dump, and it's not actually telling a story. So it's not saying that the attacker got in using these tools, these procedures, etc. It was just bad guy got in, new account created, done. But like there's no context, there's no understanding of how it got into that state.
All right. Any last things you'd like to leave our audience with?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, and thanks to the PancakesCon for selecting my talk. Thanks to Ray Redacted and his team for AV help. Thanks to my coworkers for weird ideas this week of things I could say while I'm presenting. And thanks to my amazing partner for her support this week and in general.
All right.
Yeah, I'll be in the track 2 taking questions after this.
All right, Tim, we'll see you there. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.